Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. Okay, today what we're going to do is something that sometimes gets overlooked by those of us who would call ourselves Christian case makers or apologists, a word that I typically don't use when talking about what it is we are called to do by Peter in his letter, 1 Peter, verse 15 of chapter 3. Peter tells us that all of us are called to be able to make a defense, to give a reason for the hope we have in Christ. So we're called to be Christian case makers, a word in the Greek apologia, really meaning to make a defense for or to make a case for, to give the reason for why you believe what you believe is true. So we typically, I don't like to use the word only because if you think about it, it sounds like we're either being apologetic about something or that we are being defensive and making a defense for what it is we believe. I think a more affirmative way of saying this is simply that we're called to make a case. Now, I've written online at coldcasechristianity.com. If you visited our website, you'll know all the resources that are posted there. And I often write in certain categories. And one of the categories that I write in at the website is in evangelism. Now, by the way, we just reworked the website, just rebuilt it, so it's a much more, I think, attractive. It's much easier to navigate, and all the resources that we offer for free, including free downloadable Bible inserts, all the articles, every article on the website is written in a short format and is downloadable with a single click as a PDF file, so you can take it with you. And so we've tried to make these resources available in a way that you can actually take them, fold them, put them in your Bible, and have them for the future if you're making a case for any particular topic that's listed at the website. Anyway, long story short, most people who visit Cold Case Christianity have a tendency to see it as an apologetics, quote-unquote, website. When in reality, I hope that what it really is an evangelism website, because if we're not careful, we have a tendency to kind of overlook the purpose of apologetics. Look, you know my story if you've been watching this show for very long, or you've either read Cold Case Christianity or the new book, God's Crime Scene. You know that for me, I needed to have the evidence presented to me in a way that removed barriers that were standing between me and hearing the gospel. And that's my whole point here. Sometimes people will say, well, no one gets argued into the kingdom. Well, regardless of how you feel about that, my personal story is one that demonstrates the role of case making in removing obstacles that allow me then to see and hear clearly what the gospel presentation really was. So for some of us who have to have those obstacles removed, the ability to communicate and to make a case for what you believe, to be able to respond to the objections of the atheist community, these are valuable tools that we can have as believers. And that's what we tried to build coldcasechristianity.com around this idea. But remembering that the end goal is to be able to clear a path to the gospel. In the end, I don't simply want to argue. I don't simply want to make a case for the sake of making a case. I want to be able to present the evidence that clears away the debris and allows us to do what? To share the gospel. So one of the most important categories, I think, at Cold Case Christianity, and one that maybe a lot of people don't think of it in that as being the focus of our website, is simply our section on evangelism. So for this week and for next week, what I want to do is talk about 10 reasons that we fail to share our faith. And I've written an article about this on the website. As a matter of fact, I've provided at that post a version of this that's very short and narrow, and it's the size of a Bible, and you can print it out as a JPEG, as an image, and put it in your Bible just to remind you of these 10 common obstacles. Because I bet as we talk about this week and next week, you're going to hear an obstacle that really has been your excuse for not sharing the gospel, or what you might consider to be your major obstacle, or in the end, it's probably just an excuse. And if we can at least identify these reasons why most of us don't share what we believe, we can begin to knock them down and become better and more effective communicators. Look, if we're going to make disciples of all nations, that discipleship process begins with being able to express what the gospel clearly is. Now you might argue, well, yeah, but it goes well beyond that. Fine. But it begins by taking a step of courage to share the gospel. And why don't we do it? When I travel around the country and I ask people, are you the kind of person who is like the next Billy Graham? You know, somebody in your generation. You're the person who, if you're waiting at the market, you're sharing the gospel. If you're at school, you're sharing the gospel. At work, do you realize how many people actually raise their hand and say, yeah, I consider myself to be a very active, competent, and willing evangelist? Nobody. I'm just going to be honest with you. Very few people ever raise their hands. Well, what is it that's stopping us? Let's take a look at 5 things, and we'll take a couple breaks here in this week's show, but let's take a look at 5 things that I think stand between you and me and our desire or our willingness or whatever it may be to share the truth of the Christian gospel. Here is, I think, the first thing, and it's a really simple thing. Take a look on the screen here. I think that we sometimes mistakenly think that our beliefs about Christianity and the claims of Christianity, the exclusive claims of Jesus, we sometimes think these are purely subjective. In other words, we think, well, look, I got good neighbors and they have a different view. Maybe they're not Christians at all. Maybe they're just really devout Mormons, or they're really devout people of some belief system. I'm not even sure what it is, but they seem awfully nice. This is working for them. Do I really feel comfortable walking next door or in the conversation across the fence, saying something that might bruise their own understanding and their own obedient life to their own choice of their own worldview? I remember when taking the first trip to Salt Lake City with a youth group to evangelize to Mormons, that one of the moms, and I've told this story, I'm not sure I told it here on this broadcast, but I've certainly told it on the earlier podcasts. I had a mom come to me and say, you know, I don't want to send my daughter with you to evangelize Mormons in Salt Lake City. Because I'll tell you, I know a lot of Mormons, she said, and they're sweet. And why would you want to go and take from them something that they love, that they think is true? And I thought to myself, you know, when someone says they don't want to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Christian gospel, because they don't want to take from somebody else what that group might think is true, what that person has really said and admitted is that they don't really believe that Christianity is really true any more than it might be a personal opinion. It might be a subjective view that you hold, but that's a big difference between a subjective opinion and an objective truth claim that applies to all people in all situations. And if we aren't clear about that distinction, I've done a talk here on this broadcast, done lots of talks nationally on this, the distinction, tomorrow I'm leaving for Summit, and I'll be teaching this to students at Summit Worldview Conference in Manitou Springs, Colorado. If you don't believe that what Christianity teaches is objectively, transcendently true for everyone, regardless of where they are on the planet or where they have been in history, and you only believe it's a subjective opinion that happens to work for you, and whatever they're doing, that's working for them. If that's your view, you're not going to share the truth of the gospel with anybody, any more than you're going to share your opinion about, I always say, desserts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time and effort trying to convince people chocolate chip cookies are the best dessert, because I recognize that is a subjective opinion. If that's what you think the gospel is, well, then stand by. You're never going to share it, because no one wastes their time, trying to emphatically convince people of what they know is nothing more than an opinion. So the first thing we have to be able to, I think, identify is the nature of truth claims, metaphysical truth claims, like the idea that God exists and that the only way to God is through Jesus Christ. And that is the only truth about God. It was spoken by Jesus Christ. If we don't believe those are objectively true claims, then we're not likely to share. So we have to make sure we at least understand what subjective truth claims are, what objective truth claims are, and where the truth claims related to Christianity fall on that spectrum. That's the first thing. Let's just go one more quick step. And number two, the second reason why I think people don't really share what they believe. I'll put it on your screen for you. And that's this. I think we sometimes think that we have to be, a deep theologian or an accomplished apologist in order to really share effectively. Well, think about that for a second. I understand that inhibition. I understand that concern, right? Especially when you step out publicly and you make a case for what you believe, you're going to take some hits. As a matter of fact, I always say if you're writing a blog about Christian leadership or Christian parenting, you're going to get great comments in your comment section. If you're writing a blog that makes a case for Christianity because you think it's actually objectively true, stand by. You're going to take a beating online. And that's exactly what happens to all of us who have apologetics websites, is that we get a lot of pushback because the culture really wants us all to embrace everything as equally true. Leave me alone. Let me live my life the way I want to live it. Don't even suggest that there's a better way or a truer way or a more virtuous way. I just want to be comfortable any way I decide to live. Well, that's not too hard to understand why people would want to say that, would want to do that. So I think the second thing we're talking about here is how do we have enough information to be able to penetrate, to be able to get involved in conversations when you know if you come out publicly that you're going to be exposed and your level, your depth of information, your depth of knowledge is going to be exposed. Well, let me just give you a little bit of encouragement, because I think that most people think of juries as powerful forces in our culture. These are the folks who decide whether someone's going to be convicted or set free. We make huge decisions are made in jury rooms. And those jurors, trust me, are not experts. Those jurors are just like you and me, regular people. Now, we'll use expert witnesses, and we'll bring those people in, and they'll be experts in DNA and material evidences and psychology and criminal profiling and you name it. And they'll be unbelievably educated and unbelievably gifted and unbelievably well-trained and well-used. They've been working in this field for years. But guess what? None of those expert witnesses gets to make a vote, gets to cast a vote. It's just regular folks who are passionate, who are interested, who are in the community, who come and serve on juries. Those are the people who get to vote on whether or not the suspect is guilty. You know enough to get started. And if you think, well, I need to study more before I can get started, really? Well, maybe you don't have to lead people who are already ahead. Look, the best leaders in a forest are those who stay only a couple of feet ahead of those they're trying to lead. If I get a half a mile ahead of you and I make a right-hand turn, you're not even going to see it. You're not even going to know which way I went. The best leadership is leadership that's only a couple of feet in front of those they're leading. You only need to be a little bit ahead of those you're leading. And the reality of it is there's already somebody who's a little bit behind you on any one of these areas that could use your leadership. And there's somebody else who's a little bit ahead of you who you could follow. So I want us to stop saying, well, at some point I'll know enough. At some point. If you say that, you'll never, ever open your mouth because there's always something more you could learn, right? So at what point in the spectrum are you going to step out and make a case? I think the time is now. Of course, you're going to make a case to those. And by the way, the great thing about the church is that for the most part, groups in the church are not really yet interested in apologetics to the level they should be. So just a little bit of work on your part is going to probably put you out a few steps ahead of them to begin with. Get started. We'll take a break, come back, and I'll give you 3 more reasons for this week, 5 this week, 5 next week, reasons why we don't share our faith. And all these reasons, believe it or not, are really lame excuses that you can conquer if you start by identifying them and then move through them. 3 more after the break.
In addition to Jim's daily blog and weekly podcasts and videos, Jim continues to write books designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. At coldcasechristianity.com, you'll find a link to Cold Case Christianity, a homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels, and Alive, a cold case approach to the resurrection. These resources will help you defend what you believe and share it with others. Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case note email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. Connect with Cold Case Christianity on social media. Visit the Cold Case Christianity homepage and click the social media icons on the top right toolbar. Jim is active on Facebook and Twitter, posting the best apologetics articles from over 250 Christian blogs around the country. You'll also find links to Jim's Instagram, Pinterest, and Google Plus accounts, along with the link to the Cold Case Christianity YouTube page. Stay connected with Cold Case Christianity and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, let's do 3 more reasons why people typically don't share, I think, why people don't share. By the way, on the website, I've given you an article called 10 Reasons We Fail to Share Our Faith, with a free Bible insert. And each one of these titles, each one of these sections, these 10 reasons, is hyperlinked to the article that in more detail kind of walks through that excuse that we sometimes use. So the hope here is that you'll start and use this as kind of a guide to say, okay, that's me right there. I'm number 7. And then you'll take a jump over to the article linked at number 7 so you can actually go deeper and maybe conquer this thing that's always been inhibiting you, whatever that number 7 or number 5 is for you, whatever your deal is. Now, let's take a look at the third reason why I think people don't share their faith. And it's right here on the screen. And that's that we really aren't sure who it is we should begin to share with to begin with. Who are the people we should approach? Now, I did a couple of episodes on this at for the broadcast a couple of weeks back, so you can find those. But this is really about identifying who should be on your jury to begin with. And there are principles of jury selection that we use when we pick jurors, right? Because we don't just put anybody on that jury, because sometimes you can put people on the jury, and I always say this, that cases are typically won or lost at jury selection. So you think, oh, well, it's about how well I can argue this case, about how much knowledge I have. Do I have enough knowledge to share the gospel, to be able to respond to people's doubts? Really? That's not where this is going. It all begins and ends with jury selection. If you've got somebody who is really eager to hear what it is you have to say, half the battle has already been fought. If you've got somebody who's really not interested, no matter what you do, I don't care what you do, you're not going to have the kind of impact you'd like to have. So jury selection is big, and that's about being sensitive to what God is already doing in the lives of the people around you, because God is softening hearts all the time. And if you're careful and you're just very conscientious and intentional about looking for the people that God's already moved, well, then you've got a good chance of finding somebody who's ready to hear the gospel before you even share it. So that jury selection is big, and it's about finding people who are interested, who don't hold a bias, that don't hold a reason why they would reject your claims. And I've talked about this quite a bit online. We talked about it in prior episodes, so you can download our archive. By the way, I don't know if you knew this or not, but our archive of shows is hosted on the YouTube channel, which is connected at coldcasechristianity.com. So if you've missed a show here, they're all available to watch or download on the YouTube channel. So just take a look over there and you'll see them all. Let's take a look now at the fourth, moving through the first 5 of 10 reasons why people don't share their faith like they should. Here it is on the screen. And that's something that is really foundational, and it sounds simple, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think we're sometimes just simply afraid to take the first step. And that's what it really comes down to. I mean, how many times have you been involved in some kind of evangelism training? And churches do this, right? They have an approach. They're going to do. They've purchased a plan or a strategy. There's lots of these different approaches that people take when sharing tracts. Sometimes people use tracts. They'll use questionnaires. They'll use a certain survey. They'll use a certain 4-step plan. Whatever they are. And people will train. You'll train for a day at your church in a small group setting, but at some point, you have to actually get out and start, right? And you know that that's the most frightening point for all of us. It's taking the first step. Well, here's what I've noticed. And I noticed this the first couple of years I was in Salt Lake City and Berkeley with my student groups, is that it's the anxiety the night before you're about to go do your street witnessing. It's palpable. And you can sense it. I feel bad for the students because I can tell they're really uptight. But then once they go, and by the way, that little drive over to the campus or that drive over to the temple, whatever it may be where you're going to be evangelizing, oh my gosh, you can sense the nervousness, the anxiety in the car. People are kind of trying in their heads. They're thinking about, well, how am I going to say this? They're really kind of overthinking and overplanning. Then they get out there and they take the first step and the floodgates open. It just gets so much easier because what's really been, I think, difficult, it's always the first step. And you might think, well, no, I'm concerned about, well, what if they say this? And what if I say, really, no, that's not what it is. What's bugging you is that you know how awkward it is to start a conversation with the stranger. Now, we'll talk more about this, I think, next week when we get to some of the other steps in this process and other reasons why people, because I think there's another thing I want to share with you that I think will help make this first step easier. But until we get there, I just want you to see that a lot of this can be conquered by boldness. Have you noticed that the people who are in your group or in your church or in your family who are the best at sharing what they believe, they all share a common trait, and that is a sense of boldness that separates them from others. They're courageous. And why that's important is because the thing that we're afraid of is really this first step. It's the point of first contact. So what I typically tell young people when we're out to do evangelism is that, hey, this is just uncomfortable. I get it. But trust me, if you push through that discomfort of the first contact, as awkward as you may think it's going to be, oh my gosh, there's a payday waiting for you because you'll see how much more comfortable you're going to get, how quickly you're going to get comfortable, and then how smoothly things go once you get past that first point of discomfort. So my encouragement to you is, this is simply an excuse. You've got to bully yourself through. You've got to push through. And then the rest of this stuff, of course, we can work out. But the idea that you would allow discomfort to stop the first step, you've got to overcome that. Let's take a look at the last of the first 5 reasons. And I'm giving you in 2 steps here. It's on the screen for you. This will do half this week and half next week. And that is this one, that we think we have to really know someone well before we can share the truth. We sometimes will call this friendship evangelism, right? Now, I will agree that I do think that some of the best conversations you're going to have are with your friends, because you have this ongoing relationship in which you can have a long conversation. I've said this before. I do think that some of the apologetics topics that we have to understand well enough to converse with our friends are difficult to kind of converse in 140 characters. So I've said it before, yeah, you need enough time to be able to unwrap the cumulative case for what we believe. Because like everything, like every aspect of case making that I've ever experienced when working criminal cases, the case for Christianity is a case that has to be presented cumulatively. Why would you think? I mean, if you think that the robust nature, the complicated nature, the amazing truth claims of Christianity are so simplistic. Now, it's true that the gospel's simple. The gospel is simple. But it's one of those things you can speak in a matter of a few words, but you'll spend the rest of your life trying to understand the nature of God, the rest of your life looking at the theology. I mean, it's one of those things that it's simple yet incredibly complicated, incredibly rich and informationally rich. It's a joy. If you think that you want a journey in life that has an easy entry point, but then is rich and robust enough to engage you intellectually for the rest of your life, welcome to Christianity. This is a great place to be, because some of the greatest minds in history have spent their entire lives working out the details and thinking richly and philosophically about the nature of the gospel, the nature of God. So there's a lot to think about, right? Okay. I say all that because, like I said before, we think that we want to only share with our friends because then we have the time to really unwrap some of these details. Okay, that's great. I'm with you. But if the only people you ever shared with are your friends, and you're like a lot of us, you can count your friends on one hand. Think about it. I mean, most of my close friends I can count on one hand. To not take the step to share with a stranger or to share with do you think that's biblical? Do you think that Jesus went to strangers repeatedly, people with whom, many of whom he's going to have only one contact that day, and he shared the gospel with them? Well, why? Because let's face it, this is a rescue mission. The gospel is a story about the cure for what's killing all of us. So that's why it has to move beyond your friends. You got the cure for cancer. I'm only going to share it with my friends. Really? This is about us being able to share the claims of Christ, the cure for what's killing all of us, with a culture that's dying right before our eyes. I think this is a very different kind of a claim. And if it's the kind of claim that I think it is, and that we know it is, then we can't just limit it to our friends. Yes, you'll probably do some of the most deep, meaningful conversations, repeated conversations with your friends about the claims of Christianity. But I can tell you, I've had 2-hour conversations with strangers because we happen to be stuck in the same place, like on a plane or on the streets in a missions trip. You can have long conversations. And I think we have a duty to share a cure beyond just our friends set. It's true that if we're really just we have this niche affinity toward a movie that we really like, and we have some friends that we know have similar tastes, well, then I can see why you'd want to share what you just saw at the movie theater with friends who like those kinds of movies. That's not what this is. That's not the kind of claim this is. This is a cure, and there are people who don't even know they're sick who still need a cure. There are people who are taking the wrong cure and are getting worse who need this cure. Cures are very different kind of claims, and that's what we have here with the gospel. So that's why I think it has to move beyond just our friend set. The idea of friendship evangelism, it's all well and good, but you can't limit it. I just have a certain kind of evangelism I will do with my friends, and a certain kind of evangelism that I will start and initiate with people I don't know. But both have to be in play. All right, we've covered 5 things now, and I'll just go through them again. We mistakenly think our beliefs about Christianity are entirely subjective. We think we have to be a theologian or an apologist to share effectively. We aren't sure who we should share with to begin with, and we simply are sometimes afraid to take the first step. And the last of the 5 here is that we think we have to know someone really well before we can share the truth. Well, first of all, I hope you can see that none of those should be limiters. All of those have been the excuses we've been using. Stop it. Get out there, share what you believe with those around you. And I'll see you right back here next week at Cold Case Christianity. Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. You are seeing right now part 2 of an hour we're really doing on the 10 reasons why people typically are afraid or fail to share what they believe about Christianity. And we talked last week about the first 5. We're going to talk this week, I haven't even changed clothes, about the second 5. And if you want to put these 2 episodes heel to toe, you can do that by going over to coldcasechristianity.com. You'll see the link there for our YouTube page. Head over to YouTube and you'll be able to watch the first 5 reasons why people are fail to share what they believe about Christianity. And the reason why we're doing this is because we have to be able to connect our apologetics efforts, our Christian case making, our desire to be able to defend what we believe with the overall objective of any of this, which is not simply to make a case for the sake of making a case so you can look smart, so you will feel less intimidated when someone has an objection. That's all well and good, but that's not what we're here to do. What we're here to do really is to share the gospel. And apologetics, case making, is often a way to remove the obstacles that people have in the path, in their own path, so they can hear the gospel with a different kind of heart, with a different kind of unobstructed, neutral presupposition, rather than have these obstacles which are blockading, which are impeding their progress toward the gospel. Good case makers can eliminate some of it and ask penetrating questions that actually get people to think seriously about the claims of Christianity. And didn't you see Jesus do this all the time? Ask questions that caused his hearers to go, oh yeah, he's right. And so that's what we're trying to do sometimes with apologetics, with case making. Now, I've written a couple of books to try to help do this. Well, why does anyone write an apologetics book? Think about that for a second. It's not as though the topics that we're discussing in a case making book about the evidences for theism or Christianity, there's nothing new that I can write about. What I can do, though, is take the stuff that we've been talking about for 2,000 years and contextualize it in a way that makes it accessible to a whole new group. And that's what all of us do when we write these kinds of materials. What I've tried to do is to show you how applicable criminal case work is to making the case for Christianity. Did that with Cold Case Christianity. You've got 10 tools that cold case detectives use. This new book, 8 pieces of evidence in the universe we're going to look at using a variety of skill sets from detectives, and I'll go through 8 cases with you to show you how my criminal work actually can help you make the case for what you believe about the existence of God. But what's the point of all that? I don't want just to give you a good read. I want to give you tools so that when someone has an objection they level at you, you can go, oh, you know what? I've actually thought about that. I've done some reading on that. And I actually have an approach that might help you to get past that objection, to get past that hurdle. Have you ever thought about working this like a criminal investigation? Everyone's familiar with watching crime shows. Everyone's familiar with Cold Case on TV or CSI. Have you ever thought about taking some of the same techniques and applying them to this objection you just offered? Well, I'm trying to give people tools to be able to do that. Why? Because we want to share the gospel. That's the whole point of this. The whole point of doing apologetics is for us to be able to eventually share the gospel. Well, what's keeping us from doing that? I think 10 things keep us from doing that. There's a whole section at coldcasechristianity.com just written on evangelism. Take a look at it. There's an article we're citing from this week and last week. It's at the website. It's called 10 Reasons Why People Fail to Share What They Believe. And it actually has a Bible insert, so you can print it out and put that Bible-sized insert in your Bible so that you can remind yourself, because you're in there somewhere, I'm in there, we're all in there. All of us are one of those people who have held one of those excuses and we haven't shared what we believe because we've relied on this excuse to kind of get us off the hook. Can't do that anymore. So I want us to begin by identifying what our excuse has been. And then I've linked some articles that'll help you to go deeper to try to overcome your prior excuses. So in the end, remember, all of this that we're talking about, if you're watching NRB right now, have you noticed that the NRB network has become the home of careful thinking Christianity? This is a place now where all the folks that we're all in the same work together, all the case makers are here with different shows of one nature or another. And if you just sat and watched the shows of all those people on NRB Network who are making a careful, thoughtful case for Christianity, you will be prepared. You will end up eliminating all the excuses you used to have to share what you believe. So we talked about 5 of these excuses, 5 of these reasons why people don't share what they believe last week. I want to finish this week with the last 5. And by the way, these are not in any list. This is like the most common to the least common. These are just things that I observed. I've seen in my own life. I've seen it in the lives of my friends and students that I've trained. So I want to share them with you. I'll bet you'll find yourself. Go to the screen now. This is number 6, not in any particular order, of the things that we do that we typically use as an excuse not to share. And here's one that I think is pretty common. We mentioned this last week, how we often just want to share with our friends, but we are not sure really how to engage people, and especially people who aren't our friends necessarily. We don't know them very well. How do we begin a conversation? That's going to be a bit of a challenge, don't you think? And sometimes the training we do in churches, evangelism training, is really to address this issue. What's our approach going to be? You know, isn't that kind of sad? That in a sense that I always, as a non-Christian, as an atheist, it used to bug me. I used to feel like the Christians sometimes are lined up and thinking about this the same way that car salesmen have got that first 4 or 5 words. It's like you're trying to pick up a girl at a bar. I mean, I used to drive me nuts. You know, how do you begin that conversation? But I do think that there is an excellent question that has been offered by a gentleman by the name of James Borcardo, who I met at a conference back in probably 3 or 4 years ago in North Carolina. He had a book at the time that he had really worked hard to publish really on his own, if you think about it. It was kind of a hybrid publisher of kind of self-publishing. And it's I have recommended this book probably more than any other book, especially in evangelism for sure. But I mean, I've done shows at Stand to Reason. I've done shows at the Please Convince Me podcast. I did shows for the Cold Case Christianity podcast before we had this show, all touting the work of James Picardo in a book called Unsilenced. Unsilenced. If you can go online and find this book, please do, because I think it's worth it. Unsilenced. And it's really about how, number one, he's got a strategy that answers this question we just talked about. How do I engage a conversation? How do I begin this conversation? And then he goes through a number of common responses to his approach. And his approach is not like a pickup line. His approach is not like trying to sell a used car. His approach is really quite simple. He'll ask this of all kinds of people in all kinds of settings. It'll be some version of this simple question. What do you think happens when you die? What do you think happens after death? It's some version of that question. It's modified in some way, you know. And there's only a few kinds of responses you're going to get. But you get one of a number of responses. And I will tell you what, I think it's a brilliant question. Here's why. I think it's diagnostic. I think when you ask that question, you get a sense of where people stand quickly. It's a test question that really tells you what people's worldviews are quickly. It also is a question which is focused on the goal already. I mean, we're talking about eternal life and how one gets eternal life. So the great first question is to ask is, do you think that eternal life is even possible? Or do you think this is all there is these 90 years and you're back in the dirt? Great opening question. And I've talked about it online. You can see my article. I've actually reviewed his book online. Google Unsilenced by James Picardo. You won't be disappointed. It's a very quick read. It is as close to an apologetics evangelism approach as you're going to find, because that book is really about apologetics in the context of asking a question with the goal of evangelizing. So it's kind of it says a lot, I guess, and it's kind of a circular, you might think, in that sense, but really it's brilliant. You should get it. And there's nothing in it for me, and I haven't seen James in years, but I think he would appreciate that. That's a great resource. Let's go to the seventh reason why I think people don't share what they believe. And here it is on your screen. I think we're afraid sometimes of feeling uncomfortable at any point in the process. And to me, that just sounds like an excuse, doesn't it? And here's why I say that. I want you to think about how many other areas in your life that you are willing to be uncomfortable because you think the goal is worthy of whatever temporary discomfort you have right now. And yeah, you're for sure, if you're going to share and go out on a limb, and first of all in a culture that's less and less probably receptive to the claims of Christianity, certainly with the changing in the status of marriage, the changing in the kind of sexual mores of our culture, you know that the positions that we hold are going to be less and less comfortable. So get ready. You're going to be uncomfortable in these conversations because people are going to start to throw ad hominems at you. People are going to not necessarily receive you well. All of that stuff is true. So yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable. But how many other areas of your life are you willing to put up with discomfort because you think it achieves a better goal? I mean, this is still from the simplest of things, like physical things. I mean, I run. Do I run because I do like running, but honestly, I run because I love to eat. So I'll put up with how uncomfortable I am sometimes running because it's going to buy me another 500 calories today. And when Wallace's meat, Wallace's eat. So I need to have those 500 calories. I'm willing to put up with discomfort. When I was younger and I was training all the time for SWAT or whatever it was, and we're all lifting weights and we're all out there getting injuries, trying to get big, we were willing to put up with discomfort. But even aside from that, you know that you are sometimes going to be in uncomfortable situations with your own kids, correcting them, guiding them, challenging them. And you're willing to do that. You're willing to be uncomfortable when you're guiding your own children. You're willing to take that, even though you know it's not going to be a pleasant conversation. You're willing to do it. Well, this is the same kind of thing. If we're going to say what's keeping us, imagine this. Imagine you were standing in front of God someday, and He's wondering, why are there not more people here? You had such an impact you could have had. Why didn't you speak up? If you're an ambassador, if you're a child of mine, why didn't you tell more people about? Well, you know, I think I was just, it would make me feel uncomfortable. I think you're going to feel uncomfortable now? Wait till I feel how uncomfortable you're going to feel when you're saying that later. I think now is the time for us to get over the discomfort. I said last week that one of the obstacles we have is that we don't want to make the first step. But once you get past that barrier of making the first uncomfortable, awkward contact, oh my gosh, it's so easy. You're loving it. Then the next one's even easier. And the more you do, that's why if you know people who are great evangelists, you see they're really comfortable. They're in a groove all the time. Why? Because they overcame their discomfort a long time ago. And the more you do something, the more comfortable you become at it. So part of why you're uncomfortable is because you never do it. That's why we're uncomfortable. Let's start doing it more. We'll be less uncomfortable. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll cover the last 3 reasons why people fail to share their faith.
In addition to Jim's daily blog and weekly podcasts and videos, Jim continues to write books designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. At coldcasechristianity.com, you'll find a link to Cold Case Christianity, a homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels, and Alive, a cold case approach to the resurrection. These resources will help you defend what you believe and share it with others. Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case note email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker. Connect with Cold Case Christianity on social media. Visit the Cold Case Christianity homepage and click the social media icons on the top right toolbar. Jim is active on Facebook and Twitter, posting the best apologetics articles from over 250 Christian blogs around the country. You'll also find links to Jim's Instagram, Pinterest, and Google Plus accounts, along with the link to the Cold Case Christianity YouTube page. Stay connected with Cold Case Christianity and become a better Christian casemaker.
Okay, 3 last things. This is reasons 8, 9, and 10 why people don't share what they believe as Christians. And again, these are all excuses if you ask me. We've written about this, and every one of these is an article we've written in an expanded way at coldcasechristianity.com. Just go to the website, go to the writings, drop-down menu. You'll see we've just redesigned the entire website. It's very responsive now on mobile platforms. We've even got all of these articles categorized on the phone app, which is available for you to download for free. So if you're feeling uncomfortable in one of these 7 or 10 areas, you can download either the articles or on the phone app and read through these articles to help you overcome your concerns. Now, this is number 8, the reason why people don't share what they believe. Take a look at your screen. And that is this. I think we hold pessimistically low expectations of being successful in the first place. And I mean, that sometimes is a result of maybe having shared a couple of times, or having had somebody reject your attempts to share, or experiencing, especially in family members, right? I mean, you know how hard it is to share with your family? It's tough. And I think that people sense that. And after having maybe some difficulty sharing with friends or family, their expectations become lower and lower. Well, how do I overcome? Well, first of all, are those low expectations reasonable? Let's just grant that they might be. For sake of argument, let's say, you've had some rejection when trying to share the gospel, and you're feeling like, hey, it just doesn't work out well for me, and I'm frustrated. Okay, fine, great. maybe you're right. Okay, well, there's another way around this problem. And that is because, and that is a technique that I often have established for myself, and it's been helpful. And here it is. There are times when I realize that I'm frustrated because my expectation was a home run every time I shared the gospel. My expectation was that, you know what, I really want them to come to Christ right now. Say the sinner's prayer, you know, whatever it is you would call coming to Christ. Whatever it is you would be satisfied is a home run, and you want home runs. But you know what, my casework has taught me that those aren't reasonable. And that if I'm going to make that the expectation and then live in pessimism because I didn't reach that as the expectation, that's on me. Because that shouldn't have been my expectation to begin with. You know, when I'm interviewing suspects, it'd be great to get a cop out every time you got a guy who you're talking to who you know did a murder. Wouldn't it be great to get a cop out? You very seldom get that. Especially if you get a guy who's really hardcore. You can get frustrated because you're not going to get a cop out more than likely. So I don't even try for that anymore. And I always say this, I want singles and doubles. Get enough singles and doubles, I'll get a run in, trust me. And I said it before on this show, I think. If I can demonstrate to a jury that this guy's a liar, and a pretty good liar, and he lies about all kinds of stuff that really is not appropriate to lie about, well, then they're not going to have a hard time believing he's lying about the other thing, his innocence in this case. So sometimes a single is just demonstrating for the jury, first of all, in the course of a long interview, this guy is a pathologist. This guy consistently lies for the purpose of avoiding punishment, or he knows something. That I'm looking for singles, things that inclined us to believe he's more involved than he says he is. Times when he'll trip up and make a mistake and expose that he's covering something. His use of certain words that'll expose his. I mean, I can tell you that I pick apart every word, and sometimes a 3-hour interview will not involve a cop-out, but man, it's a gold mine of other little details that will eventually help me make the case. Singles. Well, I know this is kind of a stretch to apply this to evangelism, but there are times when people will spend years moving around those bases and getting to a place where they are ready to make a commitment to Christ. And you don't know where they are on those bases. And so if your goal is to swing for the fences every time and hopefully get home runs, and you won't be satisfied unless someone runs across home plate, well, then get ready to be disappointed, because you're probably going to be disappointed again and again and again. On the other hand, if you're content that God has given you the purpose and the role today to get this guy from first to second, or get this guy to first, then you're going to be in a much different state of mind. You're going to feel less pessimistic because your expectations now are reasonable. They're at a place where they should be, because this is not necessarily about home runs. This is about sometimes just get to the plate, make contact, get a bunt. And I think when you do that, and you realize, now on the flip side of that, don't get too prideful when you see somebody does come to faith in front of you, or does make a proclamation of faith, because really somebody else has been moving that guy around the bases, or that girl around the bases, until they were finally at a place where you just did a little bit to kind of push them home. It wasn't all you. It's never all. It's always a process. And for some people, the process is shorter. For some, it's longer. Set your expectations to be part of the process, and you'll never be disappointed. Let's take a look at number 9 on your screen right now. I think that sadly, especially those of us who were raised up in the church or have a long history as Christians, we've been conditioned to speak a language that, trust me, as a guy who is not a Christian, is foreign. It's not just foreign, it's hokey. It's not just hokey, in some ways it's offensive, because we don't understand as atheists, really, we deny certain claims that Christianity makes. So when words like sin, for example, are used with a non-Christian, like me, I get offended usually. I've written a lot about this, and I actually did an article for the Christian Research Institute last year on making an analogy to cop language, because cops have a language of their own too. And there are times when we're in front of a jury at a trial, and man, we can make a mess of that trial because we'll start speaking cop language, and we start to sound like we're a living, walking supplemental report instead of just a human being who wants to communicate an idea. And I think it's dangerous. And I think that jurors and good prosecutors will either talk to those officers before they take the stand to help them not speak in that language, or that as the officer is responding and using codes sometimes, or, you'll see an expression like, I was dispatched to this call, and upon arrival I saw this. Who in the world speaks that way, though, really? Upon arrival, I got there and got out of my car, and this is what I saw. But we have a certain kind of language that we've repeatedly written in reports that becomes the kind of catchphrase language that we use in front of a jury. And we sound almost as though we're not being earnest, or that we're not being honest, like we're using this language to cover something. I mean, I think there's a danger of that. Well, isn't that also true for Christians? When you use a language that kind of, number one, makes it sound like you know something, when someone's been covered in the blood of, I went through a whole list of these online, so I won't go through all of them for you today. Maybe that's a whole other broadcast we can do. But I think there are times when that can be really either confusing. It can also be alienating because it makes it sound like you're part of a club and you're using your club language. And I'm not part of your club. And to be honest, the more I listen to you talk, the less I want to be part of your club. So I think that this is something we have to be very careful about. So I always say to myself, and it's not that hard to do if you think about it, for a lot of us who were converted as adults, it wasn't that long ago that I was not a Christian. And my language, my attitude, my view of the world was so different than it is now. I have to always remind myself of who I was back then to speak with people who are still that way today. And I think that I just would rather not adopt that language. I've often said that I have no concerns about the claims of Christianity. I believe that Christianity is true, but I do sometimes wonder why as a church we take a certain approach and why we've adopted language. Now, I think that some of this language is theologically rich and we shouldn't abandon it. Don't get me wrong. But I think when we're speaking with people who don't understand that language, if we're not going to help initiate them, if we're just going to use the language without a translator, we're not doing ourselves a service. Let's take a look at the very last one here quickly. And that is this. We think that our success as evangelists is entirely dependent on our individual effort. And this is one of those things that I want us to really think about, because the analogy I just used about baseball is key here. And I used to say it all the time. This is not a game of tennis where it's you one-on-one against an opponent, right? That's what tennis is. That's not what this is. This is a team sport. And the team is the church. And your job as part of a team is to play as a role player, to get up and do that one thing that is your role today. And sometimes that means just making contact on the ball. Sometimes that means a sacrifice fly. Sometimes that means, no, I got to swing. I mean, the bases are loaded and I got to swing. It's going to be different each time. But if you're not sensitive to the role that the entire team has played, number one, like I said a minute ago, you're going to get frustrated because you think you're all by yourself doing this, and then everything that was a success is going to all be on you. And when you fail, it's all your fault, and everything is all just you. Well, that is a recipe for failure, and it's a recipe for frustration, and that's not going to get you where you need to go. On the other hand, if you realize you're part of a larger team and you've got a role to play, and sometimes, you got to set your expectations in a certain way, because the first quarter your team got you in a hole by 2 touchdowns, and now you're trying to come back and play some catch up. And you know what? So if you can't come out of this quarter tied, it's not your fault. You're part of a team. That helps you to set reasonable expectations when you evangelize. You know what's really frustrating in a team sport is when people won't even get off the bench. But if you get off the bench and get in the game, you're doing exactly what God would ask you to do. And God's not asking you to play this like you're the only tennis player in the world who can do this. God's asking you to play a role as part of a larger team. And you get credit the minute you enter the field. You don't have to get that touchdown. So I'm just jumping from sports metaphors here pretty loosely, but to get my point, is you don't have to score. You have to get engaged, be a part of the team. And I think God credits that as the kind of effort that makes him smile. So we may not have the kind of success you think you should have, but a lot of that is because you think that this is entirely dependent on you, when in fact this is a team sport. All right, I hope that's kind of helped you to think through these issues independent of one another. 10 reasons why people don't share what they believe. You can go back and review all 10 of these when they're posted on our YouTube channel. I hope it's helpful. See you right back here next week at Cold Case Christianity.